Hi guys. Today I will show you how to create VLAN in FortiGate Firewall. We will use a Cisco switch for distributing VLANs to our end computers. We will just do it in a very basic configuration. We already have here the IP addresses to use in this lab. WAN IP, LAN IP, and IP addresses for our VLAN. We apply VLAN for network segmentation. This will help us to easily manage and implement policies in each team we have in our company. We already have all our required devices image ready. Now let us start preparing the device we need for this lab. A cloud and our FortiGate firewall. Let's have 3 computers for our 3 VLANs. And our Cisco switch. I will use WebTerm for our GUI. I just renamed it Firefox. Now let's put in our connections. All set and we're ready to go. Let's start all our devices now. By the way, to show or hide your interface labels, just click View. And then you can either enable your Show or Hide Interface Labels option. Also, I recommend to have some notes in your lab. This will help you avoid being confused on what IP addresses you assign to specific interface. You may add other notes you want to. Now that we're done adding our notes, let's proceed to our configuration. I'll double-click my FortiGate device for me to access its console. This is a Solar Putty. It is installed free together with the G and S3. Let us start our configuration in our FortiGate firewall. FortiGate default user is admin and without a password. I'll input admin. Then hit enter. Since there's no password by default, I'll just hit enter. And then input my new password. Now let's go to System Interface. Based on our plan, our WAN interface will be port 1. Before we configure port 1, we will monitor the status of the IP address that we will be assigning to it. In this case we will use 10.6.42.185. It is still unreachable. Let us continue our configuration. I will go inside in port 1. And then set its role to WAN. Set mode to static. And set the allowed access to it. Now let's assign an IP address. The IP address given to us by our internet provider. All set in port 1. Let's save our configuration. Now we got reply from 10.6.42.185. Let's see if we already have an internet. We are still unable to access the internet. That is because we did not set our gateway yet. In this case, we will create a default route. Let's create an object for our static routing. Select a device. Device means an interface where our traffic will go through. And our gateway. And then save our static routing configuration. Now that we have our default route pointing to our gateway, we expect that we also have an internet connection. Cool. Got internet access now. What we need to do next is to configure port 3. Port 3 is where our web term is connected for our FortiGate WAN access. Config system interface. Edit port 3. Set role on. Set mode static. And then set allow access ping SSH HTTP HTTPS. And then assign our IP. Set IP address 192.168.0.129/25. Then save. Our GUI access in port 3 is ready. We need to do a little configuration in our web term. Just uncomment all the lines for static configuration. Also, we need to do some adjustment on its current IP address based on our FortiGate's port 3 configuration. Then save. Let's now open our web term console by double-clicking it. From here, we can check our current local IP address configuration. Type in IP add and hit enter. Now let's ping the IP address we assigned in port 3 of our FortiGate. Woo! I pointed to a wrong IP. Sorry guys. It must be 192.168.0.129. Got the reply. Now let's access our FortiGate's GUI. Input our user and password. I'll just hit begin. And then leave this to default. We will continue our configurations here. Now let's head to Network. Then Interface. First, let's put an alias to our port 1, which is our WAN. Now let's edit port 2. Port 2 is our LAN. Set our role to LAN. And input our LAN IP address. Select which protocols we will allow to access our port 2. You may also enable the DHCP server. And specify the DHCP IP range you prefer. And then hit OK. That's it. Now we have our LAN configured in port 2. Let us begin creating our VLANs. To create a VLAN, click Create New. Then Interface. Input your VLAN name, alias for your team, and physical interface where your VLAN will run. Input a VLAN ID, and then the VLAN IP address. Select which protocols we will allow to access our VLAN. Configure the DHCP server. And hit OK. Now we're done creating VLAN 10. Let's proceed in creating VLAN 11 and 12 through the same process. Take note. Unlike the alias, VLAN name cannot be modified after the VLAN is created. So be sure to use a general VLAN name. That's it. Now we're done creating our VLAN 10, 11, and 12. You may double check it and do some necessary adjustments. The next important thing we need to do is create a firewall policy that will allow our VLANs to access the internet. By the way, for us not to create a policy for each VLAN, we can group them into one. And we can use Zone for that. Zone is a group of one or more physical or virtual FortiGate interfaces. To create a zone, let's go back to Network, Interfaces, and create new zone. Let's name it VLAN Zone. and add all 3 VLANs we created. Hit OK. Now we have our VLAN zone. Let's go back to firewall policy and create a new rule. We will name it VLAN zone to WAN. Select VLAN zone as incoming interface. Select port 1 as outgoing interface. Select all for source, destination, and service. Now hit OK. That's it. Our policy for VLAN zone to WAN is created. This means we already allowed all our 3 VLANs to access the internet. The next thing we need to do is configure our Cisco switch. First, let us create VLAN 10, 11, and 12. Next, we need to configure a trunk on port E0/0 which is connected to port 2 of our FortiGate device. Since I am using a multi-layer switch, I need to run the command switch port mode trunk encapsulation.1q. Let's add VLAN 10, 11, and 12. That's it for our trunk configuration. The next thing we need to do is to assign a port to our VLAN. Let's assign VLAN 10 in port E0/1. Then VLAN 11 in port E0/2. And then VLAN 12 in port E0/3. Now that we're done assigning ports to our VLAN, we can verify it by running do show VLAN. In this table, we can check the VLAN we created and to which port it was assigned. You can assign more ports to VLAN depending on your requirement. Now that we're done configuring our FortiGate firewall and Cisco multi-layer switch, let's check if our computers will be able to get a dynamic IP address from the DHCP server of their respective VLAN. Let us use the command IP DHCP to let our computer request an IP address from its DHCP server. Yeah! We got the IP address we expected. Let's do the same on other computers. As you saw, all 3 computers got their IP address. Now let us check if we also have access to internet. We made it! Now you know how to configure VLAN in FortiGate Firewall and allow its access to the internet. Thank you for watching this video.